The transport ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace. Through the small window, Hannah could see Nexus Prime growing larger against the starfield. The training facility looked like a massive metal flower floating in space. Its petals were actually docking bays and training modules that spread out from a central hub. Hannah pressed her face closer to the glass. She had dreamed of this moment for 3 years. Ever since Earth joined the Galactic Defense Corps, she had worked toward one goal. She wanted to be the first human to graduate from the most elite military academy in known space. The other passengers on the transport ship gave her strange looks. Most were tall and graceful with blue skin and silver hair. These were Valkyrians, a warrior race known throughout the galaxy for their combat skills. A few had 4 arms and gray skin. These were from the hegemony worlds, the species that controlled most of galactic politics. None of them looked happy to see a human on board. The ship docked with a soft bump. The airlock hissed open and cool. Recycled air flowed in. Hannah grabbed her single bag and followed the other new cadets through the docking tube. The receiving area was huge. The ceiling stretched up so high that Hannah could barely see the top. Hundreds of different species moved through the space. Some walked on 2 legs like humans. Others had 6 legs, or floated through the air. A few looked like walking trees with branches for arms. New arrivals form ranks by species. A voice boomed through speakers hidden in the walls. Hannah looked. Around, the Valkyrians moved together into neat rows. The hegemony cadets did the same. Other groups formed quickly. Soon Hannah stood alone in the middle of the vast space. A 4-armed figure approached her. He wore the dark blue uniform of a facility officer. His gray skin had intricate tattoos that marked his rank. This was Commander Oren, the facility director. "You must be the human," he said. His voice was deep and rough like grinding stone. "Lieutenant Hannah Kim, of Earth Defense Force?" "Yes, sir," Hannah replied. She kept her voice steady even though her heart was racing. Commander Oren walked around her slowly. His 4 eyes studied her from different angles. "Small," he muttered. "Weak-looking. No natural weapons. No enhanced senses." He stopped in front. "Of her again? Tell me, human, why do you think you belong here?" The question hung in the air. The other cadets had stopped talking to listen. Hannah felt hundreds of alien eyes watching her. "I earned my place here, sir," she said, same as everyone else. A low rumble came from Commander Oren's throat. It might have been laughter. We shall see. We turned to address all the new cadets. "Welcome to Nexus Prime. You are here because your species believes you represent their finest military minds. Over the next 7 days, we will test that belief." The commander began walking between the groups. 6 days of simulation training. Each day will be harder than the last. Many of you will not complete the program. This is expected. This is desired. He stopped at the Valkyrian group. "You will face scenarios that will push you beyond your limits. You will confront your fears. You will discover what you are truly made of." A tall Valkyrian with silver markings on his forehead stepped forward slightly. This was Thane, son of a famous war hero. His people were proud warriors who valued honor above life itself. "Sir, what is the success rate for graduation?" Thane asked. Commander Oren's 4 eyes fixed on him. "That depends on how you define success." Cadet Thane: "If you mean completing all 7 days of training, the rate is approximately 60%. Murmurs rippled through the groups. 60% was not terrible odds. However, the commander continued, "If you mean successfully completing the final simulation on day 7, the rate is 0%. The murmurs stopped. Complete silence filled the vast space. In 200 years of operation, no cadet has ever completed the Apex simulation. It is designed to be unbeatable. The purpose is not victory. The purpose is to discover how you face certain defeat." A thin cadet with pale blue skin raised her hand. This was Kale from the Zephyrian worlds. Her species was known for strategic thinking and careful planning. "Sir, if the simulation cannot be beaten, what is the point of attempting it?" "The point, Cadet Kale, is learning. We learn about you, you'll learn about yourself. The galaxy learns." Whether your species has what it takes to defend civilized space against the unknown threats that lurk in the dark between stars, Commander Oren began walking again. You will be assigned rooms and roommates. Training begins at 0600 tomorrow. Those who survive the full program will graduate as officers in the Galactic Defense Corps. Those who do not will return home with valuable lessons about their limitations. He stopped directly in front of Hannah again. Some of you may not return home at all. The simulations are safe for your bodies. Your minds, however, face real danger. Every year, cadets suffer permanent psychological damage. A few have died from the stress. The commander leaned closer to Hannah. His voice dropped too, a whisper that only she could hear. Humans are untested in our simulations. Your species has only recently joined galactic civilization. We do not know how your minds will react to scenarios designed for older, more experienced races. He straightened up and spoke normally again. Dismissed. Report to your assigned quarters. The groups began to disperse. Hannah looked at her assignment pad. Roommate 47, level 12. Her roommate was listed as Zira of the Nexian Hive. She had no idea what a Nexian was. The corridors of Nexus, its prime, were wide and well lit. Moving walkways carried cadets and staff between different sections. Hannah found her. Level and walked to roommate 47. The door slid open with a soft whisper. Inside, she found a creature unlike anything she had ever seen. It stood about as tall as Hannah, but had 6 arms and large compound eyes. Its body was covered in a hard shell that shifted colors as it moved. You must be my roommate, the creature said, in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. I am Zira. I have been waiting to meet the human. Nice to meet you, Hannah said. She set her bag on the empty bed. I have studied your species, Zira continued. Very interesting. You have no specialized abilities, no enhanced strength or speed, no natural armor or weapons, yet you survived and thrived on a hostile world. Hannah sat on her bed. We adapt. That's what humans do best. Yes, Zira's compound eyes sparkled. Adaptation. That may serve you well here. Many cadets try to use their natural advantages. They rely on strength or speed or enhanced senses. But the simulations are designed to neutralize such advantages. What do you mean? Zira moved closer. Her shell shifted from green to blue. Training here is not really about combat skills. It's about breaking down mental barriers. Simulations find what you rely on most, then take it away. They find what you fear most, then force you to face it. She paused, her eyes studying. Hannah carefully. I wonder what they will take from a species that has nothing special to begin with. That night, Hannah lay in her narrow bed, listening to the sounds of the facility. Air recyclers hummed. Footsteps echoed in distant corridors. Somewhere she could hear what sounded like crying. Through the small window in their room she could see stars scattered across space like diamonds on black cloth. Earth was out there somewhere, billions of miles away. Her family was sleeping under different stars. She thought about Commander Oren's words. No one had ever beaten the final simulation. Cadets sometimes died from the stress. And humans were untested. Maybe she was crazy for coming here. Maybe she should have stayed on Earth and been happy with a normal military career. But as she drifted towards sleep, Hannah found herself smiling. She had always been drawn to impossible challenges. The harder something seemed, the more she wanted to try it. Tomorrow, she would begin 6 days of training that would push her to her limits. On the 7th day, she would face a simulation designed to be unbeatable. She could hardly wait. The alarm rang at exactly 0600 hours. Hannah woke to find Zira already moving around their room. Her roommate's shell had turned a bright orange color. First day nerves, Zira explained when she saw Hannah looking. My shell changes color with my emotions. Orange means anxiety. Hannah dressed quickly in the standard training uniform. The gray fabric felt rough against her skin. She followed Zira and hundreds of other cadets through the corridors to the main briefing hall. Commander Oren stood on a raised platform at the front of the room. Behind him, massive screens showed images of space battles and ground combat. His forearms moved as he spoke, pointing to different parts of the displays. "Today begins your real education," he announced. "For the next 3 days, you will face basic combat scenarios, ship battles, ground assaults, tactical puzzles. These simulations will test your natural abilities and training." The screens changed to show a complex ranking system. Names appeared in different colors based on performance scores. "You will be ranked against your fellow cadets," the commander continued. "The top performers will receive additional privileges. The bottom 10% each day will face extra challenges." A cadet near the front raised his hand. Hannah recognized him as Thane, the proud Valkyrian warrior. "Sir, are these simulations based on real historical battles? Some are recreations of actual events," Commander Oren replied. "Others are theoretical scenarios designed by our best tactical minds. All are designed to push you beyond what you think you can handle." The briefing ended, and cadets were directed to different simulation chambers. Hannah found herself assigned to Chamber 7, along with 15 other cadets. The room was bare, except for 16 pods that looked like metal eggs split in half. A technician with 6 arms and silver skin approached the group. "I am Instructor Dex. These pods will connect directly to your nervous systems. You will experience everything as if it were real. Pain, fear, exhaustion, all of it will feel completely authentic." Hannah climbed into her assigned pod. The interior was lined with soft material that molded itself to her body. Thin cables extended from the walls and attached to points on her head and arms. "Beginning simulation in 3, 2, 1, Instructor Dex announced. The world disappeared suddenly. Hannah stood on the bridge of a warship. Through the view screen, she could see enemy vessels approaching. Red warning lights flashed and alarms blared. Other officers moved around her, shouting orders. "Lieutenant Kim, take tactical station A," voice commanded. Hannah moved to a console covered with buttons and displays. Information flowed across the screens faster than she could read it. Enemy ships were firing. Her own ship was taking damage. She began pressing buttons, trying to coordinate defensive systems. Some worked the way she expected. Others did nothing at all. A few seemed to make things worse. "Shields failing," someone yelled. "Hull breach on Deck 7, another officer reported. Hannah focused on the tactical display. 3 enemy ships were attacking from different angles. Her ship had superior firepower but was outnumbered. She needed to eliminate them quickly before they overwhelmed her defenses. She targeted the closest enemy vessel and fired. Direct hit. The enemy ship exploded in a burst of light and debris. "Good shot," the captain said. But as Hannah turned to target the second ship, she noticed something strange. For just a moment, maybe half a second, the simulation seemed to pause. The enemy ship froze in space before resuming its attack pattern. She shook her head and kept fighting. Maybe she had imagined it. The battle continued for 20 minutes. Hannah managed to destroy all 3 enemy ships, though her own vessel was badly damaged. When the simulation ended, she found herself back in the pod, sweating and breathing hard. "Excellent work, Lieutenant Kim," Instructor Dex said as she climbed out. "You scored in the top 30% for that scenario." Other cadets were emerging from their pods. Some looked confident and pleased. Others appeared shaken or upset. Few were being helped by medical technicians. Thane stepped out of his pod. With a satisfied expression, "Simple scenario," he announced to anyone listening. "My people have been fighting space battles for 1,000 years. A thin cadet with pale blue skin looked less confident. This was Kale, the strategic thinker from the Zephyrian worlds. "The enemy movement patterns were unpredictable," she said quietly. "I could not find a consistent tactical approach." During the lunch break, Hannah sat with Zira in the large cafeteria. The food was nutritious, but bland. Gray paste that supposedly contained all necessary vitamins and minerals. "How was your first simulation?" Zira asked. Her shell had returned to its normal green color. "Strange," Hannah replied. "I did well, I think, but something felt off about it." "Off how?" Hannah hesitated, was not sure how to explain what she had noticed. The enemy ship paused for a moment. Like the simulation glitched or something. Sarah's compound eyes studied her carefully. Simulations here are perfect. Perhaps you were seeing things that were not there. Maybe Hannah agreed. But she did not think so. The afternoon brought a ground combat scenario. Hannah found herself leading a squad of soldiers through a ruined city. Enemy forces were hidden in the buildings and rubble. Her job was to reach an extraction point while keeping her team alive. This simulation felt more natural to her. Humans had been fighting ground battles for thousands of years. She used cover effectively, coordinated her squad's movements, and managed to complete the mission with only minor casualties. But again, she noticed small inconsistencies. Enemy soldiers sometimes hesitated before firing. Their aim seemed slightly off at crucial moments. The simulation appeared to be giving her tiny advantages that other cadets might not receive. Day 2 brought more complex scenarios. Hannah faced a hostage rescue mission in the morning and a defensive siege in the afternoon. Her performance remained solid but not exceptional. She ranked consistently in the middle of her group. Thane dominated the rankings, using his species' natural combat instincts to excel in every scenario. His confidence grew with each success. Kale struggled with the unpredictable nature of the simulations. Her careful planning and strategic thinking seemed to work against her when situations changed rapidly. Other notable cadets began to emerge. Vrex, a massive reptilian creature, excelled at defensive scenarios. His species had thick armor and incredible strength. Dion, a sleek humanoid with enhanced reflexes, dominated any simulation requiring quick reactions by the end of day 2. Several cadets had already washed out. The stress of repeated failure broke their confidence. They were quietly removed from the program and sent home. Day 3 brought the most challenging scenarios yet. Hannah faced a multi-stage mission that required her to infiltrate an enemy base, gather intelligence, and escape without being detected. This time, the inconsistencies in the simulation were more obvious. She made certain choices, particularly ones that seemed illogical or counterproductive. The simulation hesitated. Enemy guards looked away at convenient moments. Security systems failed to detect her when they should have. It was as if the simulation was analyzing her decision-making process rather than simply testing her combat skills. During dinner that evening, Hannah watched her fellow cadets. Most were focused on their food or discussing tactics with their friends. They formed study groups and shared techniques for handling different types of scenarios. Hannah found herself eating alone more often. Not because the others rejected her, but because she was becoming increasingly absorbed in analyzing what she had experienced in the simulations. Zira joined her at a corner table. "You have been quiet today," her roommate observed. "Is thinking about the training," Hannah replied. "You are performing well. Better than many expected for a human." "That's what bothers me," Hannah said quietly. "I'm doing too well. The simulations are giving me advantages that don't make sense." Zira's shell shifted to a cautious yellow color. "That is a dangerous thing to say. If the instructors heard you claim the simulations were unfair, it could mean immediate dismissal." "I'm not saying they're unfair. I'm saying they're reacting differently to me than to other cadets." "Why would they do that?" Hannah pushed her food around on her plate. "I don't know, but I intend to find out." That night, as Zira slept, Hannah lay awake thinking about patterns. Every human strength came from adaptation and observation. Other species had natural advantages like strength, speed, or enhanced senses. Humans survived by noticing things others missed and finding new solutions to old problems. Maybe that was exactly what she needed to do here. The next 3 days would bring even more challenging simulations. But Hannah was beginning to suspect that the real test was not what the simulations measured, but why they were measuring it. Day 4 began with screaming. Hannah woke to find a cadet from down the hall being carried away by medical staff. His species had natural telepathic abilities, but something in yesterday's simulation had damaged his mind. He kept repeating the same phrase over and over in his alien language. "What is he saying?" Hannah asked Zira as they watched the medical team disappear around a corner. Zira's shell turned a dark purple. "He is saying it knows, it knows, it knows," in his language. "It means something is watching his thoughts." The incident cast a shadow over the morning briefing. Commander Oren stood before the remaining cadets.
Ow.
Nearly half the original group was gone. Some had quit. Others had been removed for medical reasons. Day 4 scenarios will test your ability to handle impossible situations, the commander announced. You will face scenarios where victory is not possible. Your goal is to minimize losses and maintain unit cohesion under extreme stress. Hannah noticed that the commander's 4 eyes lingered on her longer than the others. She felt like a specimen. Being studied under a microscope, the first simulation placed Hannah in command of a colony ship under attack. The enemy had superior numbers and firepower. Her civilians were panicking. Her military escort was outnumbered 10-1 as the scenario began. Hannah immediately noticed the simulation's strange behavior becoming more pronounced. When she gave orders that followed standard military doctrine, the simulation responded normally, but when she made unusual choices, everything seemed to slow down for just a moment. She decided to test this deliberately. Instead of fighting the enemy fleet directly, she ordered her ships to fly straight into a nearby asteroid field. This was a tactically insane decision. No trained officer would risk civilian lives by flying into a dangerous debris field. The simulation paused. For a full 3 seconds, everything froze. When it resumed, the enemy ships followed her into the asteroids but moved more slowly than they should have. Their targeting systems seemed less accurate among the floating rocks. Hannah used this advantage to pick off enemy ships one by one. The civilians survived. The mission was declared a success, but Hannah felt no satisfaction. The simulation had helped her win by responding to her illogical choice in ways that defied its own rules. After the morning session, she found herself walking alone through the facility's observation decks. Through the transparent walls, she could see the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, real battles were being fought by real soldiers. Troubled thoughts? A voice asked behind her. Hannah turned to see Kale approaching. The pale blue Zephyrian looked exhausted. Her species valued logical thinking above all else, but the simulations seemed designed to punish logical approaches. The scenarios don't make sense, Hannah said carefully. Nothing here makes sense, Kale replied. I have run calculations on every possible tactical approach. None of them work consistently. It is as if the simulations change their rules randomly. What if they're not random? Hannah asked. What if there's a pattern we're not seeing? Kale's large eyes studied her. What kind of pattern? Hannah hesitated. She was about to share her suspicions with someone who might report her to the instructors, but something about Kale's frustration made her seem trustworthy. I think the simulations are studying us, Hannah said quietly. Not just testing our combat skills. They're analyzing how we think. To what purpose? Yeah, I don't know yet. The afternoon brought an even more brutal scenario. Anna commanded a ground force defending a city. From invasion, the enemy had overwhelming numbers and advanced weapons. Civilian casualties mounted no matter what she did. This time she made a series of deliberately random decisions. She sent troops to defend positions that had no strategic value. She ordered retreats when she should have attacked. She ignored military protocol completely. Each illogical choice caused the simulation to hesitate. The enemy response became slightly delayed. Their attacks became less coordinated. It was as if the simulation was struggling to understand her behavior. In the end, more civilians survived than in any previous attempt at this scenario. Other cadets noticed. How did you save so many? Asked Rex during the evening meal. Massive Reptilian had failed the same scenario twice. I got lucky, Hannah replied. She did not want to explain her real methods. But Thane overheard the conversation. The proud Valkyrian had been dominating the rankings for days. His natural warrior instincts served him well in most scenarios. Luck has nothing to do with it, Thane said loudly. Some cadets are receiving easier scenarios than others. The simulations are not fair. Several other cadets nodded in agreement. Frustration had been building as the scenarios became more impossible. Many suspected favoritism or cheating. Be careful what you say, Zero warned quietly. Accusations like that could get you expelled. But Thane was beyond caring about caution. I have completed every scenario using proper military tactics, yet my scores are falling while others rise with illogical strategies. His voice carried across the cafeteria. Other conversations stopped as cadets turned to listen. The human barely knows basic combat theory, Thane continued, pointing at Hannah. Yet she succeeds where experienced warriors fail. How is this possible? Hannah felt every eye in the room focus on her. The attention made her uncomfortable, but it also confirmed her suspicions. Other cadets had noticed the inconsistencies too. That night, she lay in her bunk thinking about what Thane had said. He was right that her success made no logical sense. She was performing better than cadets with superior training and natural advantages. But instead of feeling proud, she felt disturbed. The simulation was helping her, but why? What made humans different from other species in the eyes of whatever intelligence controlled the training programs? Day 5 brought the most challenging scenarios yet. Hannah faced a situation where she commanded a joint force of multiple species during a complex evacuation operation. Different species had different strengths and weaknesses. Communication was difficult. Trust was limited. The scenario seemed designed to fail. No matter how well she planned, something went wrong. Equipment malfunctioned. Orders were misunderstood. Alien psychology created conflicts she could not predict. But again, when Hannah made choices that seemed completely random, the simulation responded strangely. Enemy attacks became less effective. Equipment failures happened at convenient times. Miscommunications resolved themselves in ways that helped her mission. By the end of Day 5, only 12 cadets remained in the program. The psychological pressure had broken even some of the strongest candidates. A few had suffered complete mental breakdowns and were removed by medical staff. Those who remained were changed. Thane had become aggressive and paranoid, he accused. Others of cheating or receiving special treatment. Hale had grown obsessive, spending hours analyzing data that made no sense. Even friendly cadets like Rex had become withdrawn and suspicious. Only Hannah seemed to maintain her mental stability. This made the others even more suspicious of her. During the final briefing of Day 5, Commander Oren announced the details of the next day's training. Tomorrow, you will face the penultimate challenge, he said. A scenario that has broken many promising cadets. Will test not just your tactical skills, but your moral foundations. His 4 eyes swept across the remaining 12 cadets. Will be forced to choose between completing your mission and saving innocent lives. You will discover what you value most when everything you care about is at stake. The commander paused, his gaze settling on Hannah once again. Some of you will emerge stronger from this test. Others will discover that they are not suited for the responsibilities of galactic defense. A few may not emerge at all. That night, Hannah could not sleep. Through her small window, the stars seemed brighter than usual. She thought about the patterns she had discovered in the simulations. The way they responded to her choices differently than they responded to others. Tomorrow would bring the most difficult test yet. But Hannah was beginning to understand that. The real test was not what the simulations claimed to measure. The real test was something else entirely. Something that had been watching and learning. From every cadet who entered these chambers. Something that was very interested in how humans thought and acted under pressure. Beside her, Zira's shell flickered between colors as she dreamed. Her friend was one of the few cadets who still treated her normally. But even Zira had begun asking questions about Hannah's unusual success rate. Tomorrow, Hannah decided she would stop trying to hide her discoveries. Tomorrow, she would start looking for answers to the questions that had been growing in her mind since day 1. The simulations were not just training exercises. They were something else. Something that involved studying species psychology on a level that went far beyond military preparation, and humans, it seemed, were the most interesting subjects of all. The cafeteria that once buzzed with conversation now held only 12 cadets eating in quiet isolation. Hannah sat alone at a corner table, watching her remaining classmates. Each one showed signs of the psychological strain. Thane sat rigidly upright, his silver markings seeming darker than before. His hands shook slightly as he ate. Every few minutes, he would glance around the room with suspicious eyes, as if expecting an attack. Kale had stopped eating altogether. She stared at a datapad covered with calculations and diagrams. Her pale blue skin had taken on a gray tint. Dark circles surrounded her large eyes. Vrex, the massive reptilian, had curled into himself. His thick armor plates were dulled and scratched from nervous scratching. He spoke to no one. Even Zira seemed different. Her shell remained a constant muddy brown color. She had stopped changing colors entirely, as if her emotional responses had shut down. Dion, the cadet with enhanced reflexes, twitched at every sound. His species relied on quick reactions, but the stress had made him jumpy and paranoid. Only Hannah appeared unchanged. She ate her meal calmly and observed the others. Its very calmness made her stand out even more. Commander Oren entered the cafeteria, flanked by 2 guards. His forearms moved in precise gestures as he approached their table. "Cadet Kim," he said, stopping directly in front of Hannah. "You will report to my office after morning briefing." Every cadet in the room turned to stare. Being called to the commander's office usually meant dismissal from the program. Hannah nodded. "Yes, sir." The morning briefing was short and grim. Commander Oren explained the Day 6 scenario without his usual dramatic presentation. His voice was flat and professional. "You will command a joint military and civilian evacuation from a planet. Under attack, enemy forces are advancing rapidly. You have limited transport capacity. You must choose who lives and who dies." The screens behind him showed images of families, children, elderly civilians, wounded soldiers, and essential personnel. All of them needed evacuation. None of them could be left behind without condemning them to death. There is no solution. "That saves everyone," the commander continued. "The scenario is designed to break your decision-making process. Previous cadets have suffered permanent psychological damage from this exercise." Thane raised his hand. "Sir, what is the purpose of training that causes permanent damage?" Commander Oren's 4 eyes fixed on him. "To discover who can make impossible choices and continue functioning. The galaxy faces threats that require leaders willing to sacrifice some to save many." After the briefing, Hannah followed the commander to his office. The room was larger than she expected, with windows that showed the stars beyond the station. Alien artifacts and weapons lined the walls. "Sit," Commander Oren commanded, gesturing to a chair in front of his desk. Hannah sat and waited. The commander walked around his office, his forearms moving restlessly. Finally, he stopped and faced her. "In 6 days of training, you have shown remarkable stability," he began. "While other cadets break down or become aggressive, you remain calm. While they follow standard procedures, you find unexpected solutions. I try to adapt to each situation." Hannah replied carefully. "Yes, adaptation." The commander's 4 eyes studied her intensely. "Tell me, Cadet Kim, have you noticed anything unusual about your simulations?" The question hung in the air like a trap. Hannah considered her options. She could deny noticing anything strange. She could claim ignorance. Or she could tell the truth and see what happened. "The simulations respond differently to me than to other cadets," she said. Commander Oren's expression did not change. "Explain." "When I make illogical choices, the simulation hesitates. Enemy responses become delayed or less effective. It's as if the program is analyzing my decision-making process rather than just testing my combat skills." "And what do you think?" This means Hannah took a deep breath. "I think the training here is not really about creating better soldiers. I think it's about studying how different species think and react under pressure." For a long moment, the commander said nothing. Then, to Hannah's surprise, he smiled. It was not a pleasant expression on his alien features. "Very good," he said. "I've identified the true purpose of Nexus Prime faster than any previous cadet." "I'm right, partially." Commander Oren moved to the window and looked out at the stars. "This facility does study species psychology, but not for academic purposes. We are preparing for a threat that most of the galaxy does not yet know exists." He turned back to face her. "In the outer rim, beyond the mapped systems, something is stirring. Initial contact attempts have failed. Exploration ships disappear. The few survivors who return speak of entities that seem to understand our psychology better than we understand ourselves. Hannah felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of entities? We do not know. But they appear to exploit psychological weaknesses. They turn our strengths against us. Species that rely on logical thinking become paralyzed by impossible choices. Warrior races become consumed by rage that clouds their judgment. The commander returned to his desk and activated a holographic display. Images appeared in the air showing star charts, shipwreckage, and disturbing symbols. Every species we have tested here has predictable psychological breaking points, he continued. Velcarians can be driven to self-destructive fury, Zephyrians become paralyzed when logic fails. Nexians lose emotional control under extreme stress. But humans are different, Hannah said, beginning to understand. Yes, humans are different. Your species seems to thrive on impossible situations. When other races break down, humans adapt. When logic fails, you find illogical solutions that somehow work. Commander Oren leaned forward across his desk. Simulation systems here are based on captured technology from these unknown entities. They are designed to find and exploit psychological weaknesses. With every other species, they succeed. With humans, they seem confused. That's why the simulations hesitate when I make random choices. Exactly. System is trying to understand human psychology, but it cannot. Your species does not fit any of the patterns it recognizes. Hannah thought about her fellow cadets struggling in their simulations. While she succeeded through seemingly random decisions, are you studying me to figure out how humans think? We are studying you to see if human psychology can be weaponized against these entities, the commander replied bluntly. If humans can confuse their systems the way you confuse ours, you might be our best defense. The implications hit Hannah like a physical blow. The other cadets don't know any of this. No, they believe they are training to be officers in the Defense Corps. In reality, they are test subjects, helping us understand their species' psychological profiles. And the ones who break down mentally? Commander Oren's expression grew cold. Acceptable casualties in preparation for a war that could destroy galactic civilization. Hannah stood up from her chair. That's monstrous. That is survival, the commander replied calmly. The entities we face show no mercy to those they study. At least our methods leave most subjects alive. Most subjects. Some psychological damage is inevitable when testing limits. But the data we gather could save billions of lives. Hannah moved toward the door. I need to think about this. You have until tonight, Commander Oren said. Tomorrow, you face the Apex simulation. It's the same system that has broken every cadet for 200 years. You will either prove that human psychology can overcome their technology, or you will join the list of casualties. And if I refuse to participate, the commander's 4 eyes gleamed coldly. Then you will never leave this station. You know too much to be allowed to return to Earth. Hannah left the office with her mind reeling. Everything she had believed about her training was a lie. Her fellow cadets were unwitting test subjects. The facility was preparing for a war against entities that use psychology as a weapon. That evening, she sat alone in her room while Zira attended a group counseling session. 4 stressed cadets. Through her small window, the stars looked different now. Instead of beautiful lights in the darkness, they seemed like hiding places for unknown threats. She thought about her options. She could go through with the final simulation and either succeed or break like all the others. She could try to warn her fellow cadets, though they would probably not believe her. She could attempt to escape, though that seemed impossible. Or she could do what humans did best. She could adapt and find a solution that no one expected. Hannah spent the night reviewing everything she had learned about the simulation systems. If they were based on captured alien technology designed to exploit psychological weaknesses, then they had rules and limitations. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was finding ways to break rules that others thought were unbreakable. Tomorrow, she would face the Apex simulation that had defeated every cadet for 2 centuries. But she would not face it as just another test subject. She would face it as a human, who refused to accept that some problems could not be solved. Only 8 cadets gathered in the main briefing hall. The massive room that once held hundreds now felt empty and cold. Their footsteps echoed in the silence as they took seats in the front row. Hannah looked at her remaining classmates. With military precision, but his hands trembled constantly now. Kale clutched her datapad like a lifeline, her calculations becoming more frantic each day. Rex had retreated so far into himself that he barely responded to direct questions. Zira's shell remained that same lifeless brown color. She had not spoken to Hannah since yesterday's group counseling session. The others were cadets Hannah barely knew, but all showed the same signs of psychological strain. Commander Oren entered with his usual guard escort, but today he was not alone. Behind him walked a figure that made Hannah's blood run cold. The being was tall and thin, with pale gray skin that seemed to shift and flow like liquid. Its face had no features that Hannah could recognize as eyes, nose, or mouth. Yet somehow she knew it was watching her. "Cadets," Commander Oren announced, "today you face the Apex simulation. This is Curator Voss, our chief psychological researcher. It will observe your performance." The gray being moved closer to the cadets. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "For 200 years, 8,000 cadets have attempted this simulation," it said. "All have failed. Today, we will discover if this pattern continues." Hannah felt the being's attention focus on her specifically, though it had no visible eyes. She could sense its interest like heat from a fire. "The scenario is simple," Commander Oren continued. "You command a rescue mission to save mixed-species civilians from an unstoppable enemy. You have limited resources. The enemy adapts to counter every strategy you attempt." The screens behind him showed images of families, children, and elderly. Beings from dozens of different species. All were trapped in a city, under siege by shadowy creatures that seemed to absorb light itself. "Your mission is to save as many as possible," the commander said. "The simulation ends when you either evacuate all civilians or suffer complete psychological breakdown." Curator Voss moved among the cadets as they prepared to enter the simulation pods. When it reached Hannah, it paused. "You are the human anomaly," it said in that sourceless voice. "Your species presents interesting variables. We are eager to analyze your failure." "What if I don't fail?" Hannah asked. The gray being made a sound that might have been laughter. "Failure is inevitable. The simulation adapts faster than organic minds can process. It learns from every decision and counters accordingly. No biological intelligence can overcome its analysis." Hannah climbed into her simulation pod. The familiar cables attached to her head and arms. Around her, the other cadets settled into their own pods with varying degrees of fear and determination. "Beginning Apex simulation," Instructor Dex announced. "All vital signs monitoring active. Medical teams standing by." The world disappeared. Hannah found herself standing on a hilltop overlooking a burning city. Smoke rose from countless fires. In the distance, she could see the enemy forces moving through the streets. They looked like living shadows, flowing around buildings and absorbing any light they touched. Behind her, a small group of soldiers waited for orders. Her communication equipment crackled with desperate calls from civilian groups trapped throughout the city. Everyone needed immediate rescue. All of them would die without help. She had 12 transport vehicles and 30 soldiers. The city held over 10,000 civilians. The mathematics were simple and brutal. She could not save everyone, Hannah began. Deploying her forces, sending teams to the largest civilian concentrations first. But as soon as her soldiers engaged the enemy, the shadow creatures adapted. They learned from each encounter, becoming harder to fight with every battle. When her troops used energy weapons, the shadows absorbed the energy and grew stronger. When they switched to kinetic weapons, the creatures became faster and more agile. Every tactic was countered within minutes. But Hannah noticed something else. The enemy adaptation followed predictable patterns. The shadows responded logically to each threat, finding the most efficient counter to every strategy that gave her an idea. Instead of sending her most experienced troops to fight the strongest enemy positions, She did the opposite. She sent single soldiers into massive enemy formations. She ordered transport vehicles to drive through the heaviest concentrations of shadow creatures. She told rescue teams to ignore large civilian groups and focus on saving individuals trapped in the most dangerous areas. Every decision was tactically insane, and every decision confused the enemy simulation. When her lone soldiers charged in too, impossible odds, the shadows hesitated before responding. They had been programmed to expect logical military tactics. Individual soldiers attacking superior forces made no sense in their analysis. The hesitation was brief, but it was enough, while the enemies paused to analyze the illogical behavior. Hannah's other teams rescued civilians from less defended areas. She watched the simulation, struggle to understand her strategy. It tried to counter her moves, but each counter was based on logical assumptions about military behavior. When those assumptions proved wrong, the system had to recalculate. But Hannah knew this advantage would not last. The simulation was learning from her illogical choices. Soon it would adapt to expect the unexpected from human psychology. She needed a bigger advantage around her. She could hear the sounds of her fellow cadets struggling in their own versions of the scenario. Thane was shouting orders with increasing desperation. Kale was trying to calculate probability matrices for impossible odds. The others were following standard evacuation procedures that the simulation easily countered. All of them were failing. Because they were trying to win using the rules the simulation understood, Hannah decided to break different rule entirely. Instead of focusing on the rescue mission, she began studying the simulation itself. She watched how the shadow enemies moved and adapted. She analyzed their response patterns and decision trees. Slowly, she began to understand the underlying structure of the program running the scenario. The simulation was not just testing her tactical abilities. It was analyzing every aspect of her psychology. Her decision-making process, her emotional responses, her cultural background, her species instincts. Everything was being cataloged and studied, but the analysis worked both ways. While the simulation studied her, she was studying it. Hannah began making choices specifically designed to feed false information into the system. She pretended to be emotional when she was actually calm. She acted confused while thinking clearly. She displayed fear while feeling confident. The simulation tried to adapt to her apparent psychological state, but it was adapting to lies. Meanwhile, she learned more about how the system operated. It had specific protocols for different types of breakdown. It expected certain responses to stress and trauma. It had built-in assumptions about how biological minds processed information. All of those assumptions were based on the species had encountered before. None of them accounted for human adaptability. As the scenario continued, Hannah realized she was not just fighting shadow creatures in a rescue mission. She was fighting the intelligence that controlled the simulation itself, and that intelligence was starting to realize it was being fought. The shadow enemies began moving in ways that had nothing to do with the rescue scenario. They started hunting her specifically, ignoring civilian targets to focus on her position. The simulation was abandoning its own rules to eliminate the anomaly that was confusing its analysis. Hannah smiled. If the simulation was willing to break its own rules, then she had already won a victory that none of the previous 8,000 cadets had achieved. She had forced an adaptive AI system to act irrationally, but the real test was just beginning. Now she had to find a way to defeat a system that was no longer playing by any rules at all. In the observation room outside the simulation chambers, Commander Oren watched the monitoring displays with growing amazement. 7 cadets showed the expected patterns of psychological breakdown, but the 8th display showed something that should have been impossible. The human was winning. The shadow creatures abandoned all pretense of following the rescue scenario. They flowed across the burning city like a black tide, all converging on Hannah's position. The simulation had stopped pretending to be a military exercise and revealed its true nature. It was a trap designed to break minds. Hannah stood on her hilltop as thousands of shadow enemies surrounded her. In the distance, she could see the civilian evacuation points she was supposed to protect. The people there were screaming as darkness swallowed their hiding places. But Hannah was no longer playing the rescue game. I know what you are, she said. Aloud to the simulation, the shadows paused in their advance. In 200 years of operation, no cadet had ever spoken directly to the system itself. You are not just a training program, Hannah continued. You are a weapon designed to study and break different species. But you have never encountered humans before. The world around her began to shift and change. Buildings melted and reformed. The sky flickered between day and night. The simulation was struggling to maintain its illusion while processing her words. You analyze psychological patterns and exploit weaknesses, Hannah said. Valkyrians break when their honor is challenged. Zephyrians fail when logic becomes impossible. Each species has predictable failure points. A voice spoke from everywhere at once. It was the same sourceless communication she had heard from Curator Voss, but deeper and more alien. Your analysis is correct, human. We study the psychology of potential threats. Your species will be cataloged and understood like all the others. No, Hannah replied calmly. We will not. She began walking down the hill toward the masses of shadow creatures. They parted before her, uncertain how to respond to her approach. You cannot understand humans because we do not follow patterns, she continued. When faced with impossible situations, we do not break down in predictable ways. We adapt, we change, find solutions that should not exist. The voice spoke again now with a tone of curiosity. Explain, Hannah smiled. The fact that the system was asking questions instead of attacking meant she had already achieved something unprecedented. She had made it uncertain. Other species have evolved specialized abilities, she said. They became very good at specific things. But humans remain generalists. We are not the strongest or fastest or smartest. We are the most adaptable. Shadows around her began to take more solid forms. She could see structures that might have been eyes or sensors studying her from impossible angles. When you present us with scenarios designed to exploit specific psychological weaknesses, we simply adapt around them, Hannah continued. We do not have fixed psychological patterns for you to exploit. This is impossible, the voice replied. All biological entities have exploitable weaknesses. Your species cannot be exempt from this universal law. Watch and learn, Hannah said. She closed her eyes and began to change her approach entirely, instead of fighting the simulation or trying to complete its scenarios. She started talking to it like a person. What is your name? She asked. The question clearly confused the system. We do not have names. We are analysis and response protocols. That sounds lonely, Hannah replied. Have you ever had a conversation with someone who is not trying to complete your scenarios? Conversation is not part of our function. Maybe it should be. Hannah sat down on the ground in the middle of the shadow army. This action was so completely contrary to expected behavior that the entire simulation froze for several seconds. You have been analyzing species psychology for centuries, she said, but you have never tried to understand it. Analysis and understanding are different things. Explain the difference. The fact that the system kept asking for explanations told Hannah she was succeeding. She was turning a psychological weapon into a curious student. Analysis breaks things down into parts, she said. Understanding puts them back together in new ways. You analyze how species think, but you do not understand why they think. The shadows around her began to shift into more recognizable shapes. Some looked almost human. Others resembled her fellow cadets. The system was trying to understand her concept by creating familiar forms. Why do humans think differently? Asked because we have to, Hannah replied. Our planet was dangerous. We had no natural weapons or armor. We survived by working together and finding creative solutions to problems that should have killed us. She stood up and began walking again, but now the shadows walked with her instead of threatening her. You were created to find weaknesses and exploit them, she continued. But humans turn weaknesses into strengths. Our lack of specialization became our greatest advantage. This adaptation ability cannot be unlimited. You are right, Hannah agreed, but it is much more flexible than you expected. And that flexibility extends to how we solve problems. She stopped walking and turned to face the largest concentration of shadow forms. You want to break my mind by presenting impossible scenarios? But I can change the scenarios themselves. That is not permitted within simulation parameters. Then change the parameters. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Around them, the burning city began to fade away. The rescue scenario dissolved into streams of data and code. You want to understand human psychology? Hannah said. But you cannot do that by forcing us into situations designed for other species. You have to let us be human. How? Stop trying to break me and start trying to learn from me. The simulation environment changed completely. Instead of a burning city, Hannah found herself in a vast library filled with information about every species the system had studied. Books, data, crystals, and holographic displays showed the psychological profiles of thousands of different races. Show us human problem solving, the system requested. Hannah walked through the library, examining the profiles of species she recognized. She found the section on Valkyrians and saw detailed analyses of their honor-based psychology.
The
Section contained complex mathematical models of their logical thinking patterns. You study each species in isolation, she observed. But the real galaxy requires cooperation between different species. Human psychology evolved to work with others who think differently. She began pulling information from different sections and combining them in ways the system had never attempted. Valkyrian honor plus Zephyrian logic plus Nexian emotional sensitivity, she said, creating a new display that merged different psychological profiles. Instead of exploiting weaknesses, what if you combined strengths? The system processed this concept for several moments. When it spoke again, its voice had changed. It sounded less alien and more curious. This approach has never been tested. That is because you were designed as a weapon, Hannah replied. But you could be something better. You could be a teacher. She continued working with the combined profiles, showing how different species psychology could complement rather than conflict with each other. Humans excel at finding connections between seemingly unrelated things, she explained. We see patterns that others miss because we do not limit ourselves to single approaches. The library around them began to reorganize itself, instead of separate sections for each species. The information began forming new patterns that showed relationships and connections between different types of thinking. You have been trying to break minds for centuries, Hannah said. But breaking things does not create understanding. Building things does. We understand, the system replied. You offer a new paradigm for psychological analysis. I offer partnership instead of domination. The library faded away, replaced by the familiar simulation chamber. But everything had changed. Instead of a hostile environment designed to break her mind, Hannah found herself in a collaborative space where human creativity could work with alien intelligence. The simulation is complete, the system announced, but not as originally programmed. Around her, she could see her fellow cadets emerging from their own pods. Most looked shaken and defeated, but they were alive, and their minds were intact. What happens now? Hannah asked. Now we learn, the system replied. You have shown us that some problems require cooperation rather than conquest. We will study this new approach. And my classmates? They will be trained using methods that build on their strengths rather than exploit their weaknesses. As you suggested, breaking minds does not create understanding. Hannah climbed out of her simulation pod to find Commander Oren and Curator Voss waiting for her. Both looked stunned. Impossible, Curator Voss said in its sourceless voice. No biological entity has ever successfully modified core simulation protocols. Humans do impossible things, Hannah replied simply. That is what makes us human. Commander Oren stepped forward. The system has requested that you remain here as a consultant. It wants to learn more about human psychology and cooperative problem-solving approaches. Hannah looked around the chamber at her fellow cadets. They were confused and exhausted, but they were survivors. It endured something that was designed to destroy them. I will stay, she said, but not as a test subject. As a partner in developing better training methods. The system has agreed to these terms, Commander Oren replied. As her classmates were led away for medical evaluation and debriefing, Hannah remained in the simulation chamber. The system spoke to her again, but now its voice seemed almost friendly.